What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm the Crockneck, and once again I am back with some more States of Metal, and this time we are going to go to Oklahoma, where the wind comes sweeping down the plain. Seriously, how many states actually have their own musical? Probably more than I think, because I don't like musicals, but yeah, I had to throw that in there. This is yet another smaller one here, even in terms of like extra bands I was looking up outside the ones that I had. I really couldn't find that much, but I still have a pretty good diverse bunch here. But anyway, let's talk about Oklahoma and what I know about it. It is known as the Sooner State, which is the name of the people that illegally immigrated into the state when it was still just a territory. Kind of ironic given the state's stance on illegal immigration, but you know, whatever. As I said, this was designated an Indian territory up until 1889 when it was included in the United States, to which I'm pretty sure everyone there was like, well, hey, this is like extra ours now. The state's name literally translates to the Red Man State, which is kind of interesting and you know, probably hasn't aged that well given the fact that we fought a lot of wars with those people and pretty much mercilessly slaughtered them until the state was ours. But the name does literally translate to it, and most people just call it the Sooner State anyway. I'd say that this state and Kansas, Nebraska, and Texas are all kind of in a four-way race in terms of which state tornadoes like to fuck up the most. In particular, though, I know that this state has had a lot of like famous tornadoes. The 1999 Bridge Creek tornado in particular, I mean, like the fastest wind speeds ever recorded on the planet. Yeah, no, that's fucking terrifying. There was also the El Reno one from 2013 that was 2.6 miles wide. Holy shit, that is a lot of fuck you descending from the sky. The state has two state fairs, which I thought was kind of interesting, and I mean, it also kind of tells me there might not be much to do if you have to have two state fairs to kind of get people out. I mean, outside of like tornado chasing, I really can't think of much else to do in Oklahoma. Well, maybe go to like a Sooners game or something like that. This state also has its own state meal, which I think that's a first for me. I don't think I've ever heard of a state having its own state meal. I believe it's something kind of like, you know, biscuits and gravy or something like that. Like something that is just outright like, you know, high calorie and, you know, just American as hell. It made me think about what Ohio state meal would be, and it would probably be like chili dogs and then just like unbelievable levels of regret. I also found out that tattooing was actually banned in the state from 1963 to like 2006, which kind of shows you how rigid the state is. It's also the only state that makes iodine, I believe, which if you're my age, you know iodine is the thing that they would put on your road rash to not only clean it out, but also to make it hurt even more. When I was a kid, it was either iodine or rubbing alcohol, kind of like dealer's choice from the parent. It sucked enough to make me like not tell mom when I fell down off the bike and skinned up my knees or my elbows or anything. Just covered up, wear long sleeves, and steal a bunch of Band-Aids. And of course, because it's a state, there are some weird laws, and the first one I came across, I don't even know why it even needed to be written down, but I mean, that's kind of the case with a lot of these. But Oklahoma felt it necessary to make whaling illegal in the state. A landlocked state. It is illegal to go after marine mammals. I should also include that this state is 49th in education, so that might explain why some of these laws are so fucking stupid. It is also illegal or frowned upon, I don't know how much this is enforced, to make ugly faces at dogs. Which is kind of messed up because if you're a hideous chud and you just look at a dog, they could probably cite you for it. It's also illegal for cowboys to wear their boots to bed, which I don't even know why the fuck they would anyway, but yeah, you can't do that. It's also illegal to kiss someone longer than 3 minutes, which, again, like that's another one where I feel like it's just kind of nonsense. Like, is some cop gonna like stand by a couple with a stopwatch like, hey, you're on the clock, all right? And finally, and this one was just kind of odd, and I guess it kind of goes with the whole spit swapping thing. It is illegal for someone to take a bite out of someone else's cheeseburger. Now, again, I don't know how any of these are enforced or if they're actually enforced at all, but I figure if someone offered another person a bite of their cheeseburger, the cops aren't just gonna come in there and say, hey, you can't do that for reasons. The more I go over the States of Metal stuff, the more I find out that the US has been broken for a much longer time than I thought. Anyway, while this metal scene was, you know, relatively small and there's not really a lot of like super well-known bands here, I did find some that I thought were pretty damn good. And there was even one that while I was looking around for bands to kind of round out this list, I ended up buying their album for a couple of reasons. One of them being that I really enjoyed it, and two of them, it just kind of shocked me in a way. And, well, yeah, we'll get down to that one eventually. But we're going to open this list with the oldest band that I have on here, and that is Powerlord with their lone full-length, The Awakening. This was an Oklahoma City-based thrash metal act, and again, kind of a small scene. Honestly, I can't think of another thrash metal act that was from Oklahoma City that at least, put out a full length. There's probably some other ones, but this was probably the most well known, and honestly, this album flat out whoops ass. Now, this came out in 1986, pretty much, I would say, like, thrash's height. Like, 86 is, like, the big year for thrash. You had P-Cells, you had fucking... Master of Puppets, Rain and Blood, a lot of killer albums. But this band formed in 1983 and didn't get around to putting out a full length until 3 years later. They had some demos before that, but by the time this came out, it was, kind of dated sounding, much like the same thing that kind of happened with, Exodus Bonded by Blood, even though I absolutely love that album. But this didn't sound like what was coming out in 1986, where thrash had become more refined. This sounded like it would have come out like the first wave of thrash around like 1983. And again, it was in Oklahoma City where I don't think anyone was really looking for thrash bands. This was pretty much helmed by the Gorley brothers, Tony and Bob. Bob actually spent a short amount of time in Dark Angel. And Bob also briefly played live in Slayer, probably during one of the times where, Dave Lombardo was getting fucked over. But this, I would say, is, again, like, very on par with, like, the debut material from, like, a lot of the big four bands. A lot of D beats, a lot of, like, really solid riffs. The vocals on here were definitely more sung. Their vocalist, Dane Cook, not that one, kind of sounded a bit like Neil Turbin. Like, you get some high-pitched wails every now and then, and his singing delivery was, tuneful, but, a little bit on the gruff side. But the main thing on this album are riffs. The riffs on here are solid as hell. Lots of good, shreddy, dive bomb riddled leads that also had, a little bit of melody to them. Tons of galloping, chuggy rhythms. Masters of Death, the opening track in particular, I think is fantastic. Same thing with Merciless Titans. It's very up-tempo, very energetic for the most part. Lots of D beats, the title track. The Invasion of the Lords. Solid, high-energy songs. Again, just propelled by just excellent riffing. But they also showcased a little bit of depth to their sound. Silent Terror in particular is probably a big standout, notably for being slower, a little bit more sinister and doomy too. Like, this is where, like, that more, like, evil Slayer sound came out, because a lot of this I would compare to, like, early Anthrax, like, namely Fistful of Metal. I'd also say, like, the first two Annihilator albums, and definitely early Overkill, especially the first two albums. But Silent Terror showcases a little bit more in the way of songwriting dynamics. It's a little bit bigger of a song, and man, when it, like, builds a head of steam, like, towards the end of it, it just sounds fucking awesome. But yeah, I love every track on here. I think the title track, the last one, is possibly my favorite. That is just a full-on, just thrashy ripper. And the more I listen to this, which I got this, God, forever ago, this is a reissue on Shadow Kingdom Records, man, like, if this band had not been in Oklahoma, and they had, kind of had like a scene around them to support them, because I can't imagine there were a lot of metal bands in Oklahoma to really kind of have like a good foundational scene to build upon where, the bands were supporting one another, which probably was a big contributing factor for why this band didn't last very long. But this, I think, is an old school gem, and we might do a full-on, like, retro review of this one day, because I think it's super underrated. If you're a big fan, again, of early Anthrax, Slayer, Overkill, definitely, Annihilator, all those bands I brought up, definitely check this album out. And who knows, we might actually do a full-on retro review of this one sometime in the future. The Agony Scene, self-titled. This is the debut album from this Tulsa-based metalcore / melodic death metal act. I got it in this band courtesy of Solid State Records samplers. This is a Solid State band, but I'm not entirely sure if I would call them a Christian band. They do have some Christian themes, but they never identified as a Christian act. And there were even rumors going around as to whether or not they faked being Christian just to get signed to the label, which, yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's like anything to that. But it was a pretty decent sized label, actually probably still is. And if they weren't being courted by anyone else, then yeah, I don't know, maybe Fake the Funk. But I heard the opening track on this album, We Bury Our Dead at Dawn, on a sampler, and I was like, dude, this sounds awesome. This is very much in line with the like more straight ahead at the gates style metalcore that was coming out in the mid 2000s. I mean, this came out in 2003. There's a big melodic death metal presence on here. Like, I would say this band is very comparable with Darkest Hour in a way, where the metalcore elements are definitely there. You have the heavy syncopated breakdowns and such, and like, good hardcore energy. But there are a ton of heavy mellow death riffs on here. Habeas Corpus, Eyes Sewn Shut, The Damned, pummeling, heavy, but melodic as hell. The production here is just gnarly. Like, everything is loud and crisp. The guitars in here have this just like overdriven mega crunch on it, and the vocals are pretty gnarly too. Like, this guy definitely does a lot of the Thomas Lindbergh sort of thing, where it's kind of a mid-range to high scream, but there are good death roars every now and then to kind of break it up. And unlike a lot of like the more melodic metalcore that was coming out, this didn't bother with like clean vocals really at all. Like, there's a couple of sections on here where there are some clean vocals, like their cover of Paint It Black, which was kind of an odd choice, but honestly, it wasn't too bad. But for the most part, this is just screaming in your face. And for as aggressive as this is kind of overall, it still maintains a good sense of melody, but it doesn't feel cheesy. It doesn't overdo any of that. Honestly, at points, I kind of forget that this band was Christian metal, or maybe not. I don't know. Again, that's kind of debatable. But there's a lot of like sinister melodies in here that kind of give this like a dark presence, especially on Nausea. Nausea has a really good sinister atmospheric build-up. It's a slow, brooding, menacing song with a lot of atmospheric melodies to it. And it's a good break from the full tilt aggression here. Like, when they're not going like full bore at the gate style metalcore, they kind of, break it down a little bit further and go back to like almost Earth Crisis sort of sound with a lot of the heavy grooves on here. Now, this band has some other albums I think that are pretty good. The follow-up to this one, which was their Roadrunner Records debut, I thought was, kind of like a diet version of this. But their other two albums, Get Damned and Tormentor, I think are particularly awesome. I chose this one because I still really love this album, and, this is the one that got me into the band. But yeah, if you're a big fan of Unearth, again, Darkest Hour is probably the biggest one in here. A little bit of like early As I Lay Dying too, I would say. And definitely At the Gates, because At the Gates is all over here. Check this out. Really solid album. Black Magnet, Hallucination Scene. This is the debut album from this Oklahoma City one-man industrial metal act. We actually did a review of this album, and I even covered their second album, Body Prophecy, in a collection update. This project, helmed by one James Hammondtree, is an amazing throwback to a lot of like really old school industrial metal in general. Think Godflesh, Ministry, Nine Inch Nails, early Pitch Shifter. It's dark, gritty, caustic, at least at times. This kind of balances out like a lot of the industrial metal that I was listening to, whether it was, again, like all those bands I just mentioned, or, like stuff that was way more geared towards just industrial, like Frontline Assembly, Front 242, Skinny Puppy, stuff like that. This whole thing is almost like a love letter to kind of all of these bands. You have heavier, more punishing tracks with big droning riffs, like Divination Equipment, Punishment Map, and Nero Prophet. Definitely more along the lines of like early Pitch Shifter and, definitely Godflesh. And you even have like the more like danceable, like kind of like goth night tracks like Crush Me, Anubis, and Trust Fucker, which honestly, the beat on that is pretty much spot on with the beat on Nine Inch Nails Closer, which, that was a goth night favorite for years. Probably fucking still is. A lot of this kind of brought me back to like going to goth night and hanging out and listening to, all this cool stuff. Both the stuff that was, again, more for the dance floor, and then, occasionally getting the DJ to play something that was a little bit more harsh and just kind of dark sounding. Again, I love Godflesh. Like, that's one of those bands that's kind of like the standard for industrial metal for me. And this band really does a good job of capturing that vibe. But again, it's a more broad stroke when it comes down to just industrial metal and industrial in general. The production here, I think, is just about perfect for the style. The drums, they have that old school, very mechanical, like drum machine sound that, again, you would hear on a lot of like, Godflesh and even Nine Inch Nails releases. The guitars are hyper distorted, as are the vocals. You have a lot of different vocal filters to capture a lot of different moves. And of course, looped soundscapes and machinery. It's very harsh and caustic at times, but also swirling around all the dense, harsh noise on here is a lot of like really cool ambience too. The atmosphere, again, is just about perfect. And I like how some of these songs will change gears on you, like Crush Me in particular, kind of like lures you into the whole like more like danceable kind of like, you know, booty shaking goth night kind of thing. And then as it goes on, it gets heavier, more menacing. It kind of just like lures you onto the club floor and then clubs you on the head. Hegemon, I think that's how you say that word. Another really cool track that has a really, you know, nice like atmospheric build. It's a little bit more dark and sinister, you know, kind of like withdrawn a little bit. Like it's not as just like in your face as some of the stuff is. It takes a little bit to build into it. And it's a little bit more melodic overall, like, you know, not pleasant melodies. They're all very dark and sinister, but the melodies are a little bit more pleasant and it doesn't quite have all the harsh noise that is, you know, all over this album. Baseline, if you're a big Godflesh fan, I strongly recommend this. But also if you like different styles of industrial metal, like you want a little bit of like that kind of cam FDM fun with a good riff and kind of a danceable beat, there's a little bit of that on here. But for the bulk of this album, and I would say maybe on the second album too, a lot of it is just very dense, very harsh, very mechanical. It's kind of everything that I would want out of this style in general. Check this album out. Check out their follow-up too. And if you're in the Indiana area around, I believe, August, this band, I believe, is playing at Heavy Hell. I'm still not sure if I'm going to make it out there because the headliner is 6 Feet Under. And, man, I really don't want to see 6 Feet Under. But I know I can always leave before they go on. But there's a lot of bands I do want to see on that bill, this one included. Check this album out. And, again, check out their follow-up too. It's also really good. Chat Pile. Cool World. This is the second album from this Oklahoma City noise, sludge, hardcore act. This band is hard to describe, but here I am once again trying to describe this band. It is unnerving. It is unsettling. It's dark. I mean, it's extra dark if you know what the name of the band actually means or is a reference to, especially given the fact that there are like ghost towns in that state that is, you know, kind of due to chat piles. In terms of like heavy music, I don't even know if this kind of falls in the metal bracket, but they kind of do. Like this is dense. It's disgusting. The guitar tone is sludgy and fierce. It's maniacal, it's twisted, it's like Melvins and Jesus Lizard and like I Hate God got together with like Glassjaw and I don't know, like maybe Swans too, and decided to make the most uncomfortable music possible, but also find a way to squeeze in melody, which is on here. It really is. Like some of the songs in here are particularly catchy. Frownland, which is a weird title. Milk of Human Kindness, that song is just dark and strange and I don't know, it's very alluring. Tape, Camcorder, all these songs, they have like really solid grooves. There are interesting, you know, very atonal, very distant melodies, but somehow it kind of comes together to form something that kind of appeals to the ear, but also kind of just weirds you out, especially when you add the vocals. Vocals add a whole other layer of creepy and unnerving to this. They sound like someone ranting to themselves after like a nervous breakdown. That's where I got like a lot of the Jesus Lizard sort of comparisons, but also like Killing Choke, especially during some of Jazz's more like unhinged rants and songs. The production here is, again, also very strange. Like the drums have a very, you know, like modern sound to them, but again, there's like this layer of grit that is all over this production that you can feel with, you know, the bass and the guitar kind of blending together into a wall of mud. And again, all these very strange atonal melodies across this whole album. And this is the more accessible one, at least in my opinion. God's Country, their debut album, is even more dark and vicious. And I feel like the songs in here are a little bit more put together as far as like grooves and some slight but very like obscure hooks. Either way, this band occupies some really interesting territory in terms of heavy music right now. This was honestly kind of close to making my year-end list, but there was other stuff that, you know, I admittedly got into more. And this was still kind of like a Rubik's Cube, like I was still trying to solve. And admittedly, I'm still kind of there. Like this is just a really weird, dark album, but it's very alluring. Like, I keep coming back to it, trying to understand more of it and kind of like, digging through the layers of chat in the pile, I guess. If you're a big fan of, just kind of like off the wall heavy music, again, like Killing Joke, Jesus Lizard, I'd throw Melvins in here too, for sure. Like bands like that, and then like, I don't know, a light seasoning of bath salts, then I think you would get this album. Check it out. It is an odd listen, but honestly, it's really good. Like, I really dig this album. God's Country is still a little bit too much for me. I don't know, I haven't revisited that one in a while, but either way, check this out. This is just some mutated form of heavy music out there that is just hard to describe, but honestly, I dig it. And finally, we have Broken Flesh with their self-titled album. This is the third and final album from this Oklahoma City brutal death metal act. They broke up last year, and this is Christian brutal death metal. I didn't think that existed because just those two things coming together, it just doesn't seem possible, because I'll be honest, listening to this, I feel like this band is almost too heavy and too brutal to be Christian. This is probably the heaviest Christian death metal album I think I've ever heard. Very much on par with like Gorgasm, Suffocation, Cryptopsy, Vomit the Soul. Like, just think of the most heavy, intense, brutal death metal out there, and this could probably match it. I could pretty much just sum this up with saying, Jesus Christ, this is heavy, and that would be totally accurate. This is loaded with slam breakdowns, intense syncopated riffs, blast beats, and just horrifying, brutal death metal gutturals. I went hunting for this one. This is the one that, caught me completely off guard. I listened to it on Spotify and then immediately ordered this. I even sent some tracks to Jam and John and was like, dude, you have to check this out. He's like, well, this is pretty sick. It's like, dude, they're Christian. And even he was like, that's almost impossible. This is too heavy. Like, they would have to go to church after every single track on here because it was so violently just brutal as hell. And yeah, I know you're looking at the album cover and there are some upside down crosses on there, and it's got like the artwork and the aesthetic. Even their t-shirt designs look gross as hell. But it is Christian. In fact, I think in here someplace they have like a way to get a hold of them in case you wanted to talk about like the Lord or something, or you're, just doing, not so well. That's kind of cool at least. But yeah, for every single song in here that feels like they're about to, do a song about mutilating hookers with like a lawnmower or something like that, it's about, loving Jesus and like maybe going to like Bible camp and having a profound experience. But musically, I think this is really good. Like, tons of blast beats, but they break up the blast beat patterns with some really clever fills, lots of solid grooves. The production on here is great. Like, you can hear everything clearly. And this thing packs a monstrous punch with every single song. They're short, they get in quick, they fuck you up, and then they leave you a pamphlet, for coming to their church on Sunday. I particularly like the track Unworthy for being a little bit more groove-laden. It kind of lays off the blast for a little bit. Same thing with Ignominy as well. Again, kind of gets more into like some heavy grooves, vicious chugging on that one. Like, I think that one's got like a bunch of big triplet chugs that just curled my lip for Christ. The rest of it, well, I don't think this band has like a tremendous amount of variety in their sound. They execute their sound well. And this album at no point lets off the gas. It is exceptionally heavy. And again, it's just kind of thrown off by the fact that this is a Christian brutal death metal band. But yeah, if you're a big fan, again, of like just flat out brutal death metal, like early Dying Fetus, which this band may or may not have like opened for at one point, and again, probably went to church on Sunday saying, dear Lord, I'm sorry I opened for that blasphemous, gore-loving band. But yeah, Gorgasm, Deeds of Flesh, stuff like that. Check this album out. This thing is an absolute monster. And I might actually check out their other albums too, just to see how visceral this band was in the earlier days. But yeah, check this out. It's a fucking monster. And that will do it for Oklahoma. Again, kind of a short one, and the next one that's coming up is also short. But again, I kind of want to do some of these states that are not known for metal and kind of go searching and see what I can find, because that's kind of part of the fun of this. Either way though, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We also have memberships. They are only 99 cents, and our lone perk is doing a members only live stream. We'll probably be doing one after MDF. Probably give you like a fun recap of all the shenanigans that we got in and all the bands we saw. But memberships are the main way to support the channel overall. We still have our store, thrallsmetal.com, with our hats and shirts. That is linked down below. And there's a join button down there if you would like to join up and hang out and, you know, watch our dumb streams. I don't really know how to upsell this, but I'm trying. And of course, thank you guys so much for all of your support, the likes, the shares, the comments. All of it means the world to us. It is still amazing doing this, and honestly still, I think, one of the coolest things I've done with my life, which is probably kind of sad in retrospect, or at least in perspective to other people's lives, but that's theirs. I find this entire thing to still be absolutely amazing. Tons of content coming towards you in the future. So one more big thank you, because you guys are awesome, and we will catch you later.